at the ITAP conference and in 2018, and I'm here with Janice Caudill, and we are excited to share a little bit about disclosure at this conference. I am Dan Drake. I'm founder, clinical director at Banyan Therapy Group in Los Angeles, California, and we do intensives. We work with addicts and couples and partners, and one thing that we started was a 6-week intensive outpatient program for those that need a higher level of care but that aren't able to work it into their budget or their schedule to go to a residential. So that's something that we provide. What about you?
I am a family psychologist in McKinney, Texas, about an hour north of the DFW area. I'm the founder of McKinney Counseling and Recovery, and I also have a side business in intensive recovery coaching. I work with partners, addicts, couples, in groups in like traditional outpatient care, and also do intensives with all of the above, including disclosure intensives.
And speaking of disclosure, that's something that we're actually here at the conference presenting on. So we're doing 2 talks. One you're doing today on working with a partner, and I'll be working with how to prepare the disclosing party for the disclosure process. So that's something. You want to talk a little bit about how we got connected and what we're doing?
Yeah, Dan, as I say, there's a long distance between Texas and Los Angeles. Dan and I kind of met in a mutual interest in working with recovery from a partner-sensitive, relationship-sensitive approach. Found that despite the difference, we have really similar ideas, and you're actually fun to work with. And between the two of us, in creating materials to help our clients through that process, that we had a pretty good foundations for a workbook. So we've been sort of collaborating for the last, year?
I think it's been longer. 2 years maybe?
For the last year, trying to create like a set of materials that can help guide our clients and guide therapists in this process. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we're really excited about that. So that's one thing we're talking a little bit about at this conference. And I think what we wanted to provide in this video is just some of the basics, some of the foundations of what we see as the importance of disclosure. So why do we do this thing? I mean, I'll say for me, when I first got into this field, it sounded really extreme, especially you have the word polygraph thrown around. That just seems so extreme, and I was kind of taken aback by it. But I've come to see how important it is. So that's something we wanted to share. And let me just talk a little bit about how I see disclosure and where it fits into this whole thing. For me, I think most of us would look at relationships and say that intimacy is the goal for a relationship. I mean, wouldn't you agree that's what we go into relationships for connection, for depth? Unfortunately, when it comes to sex addiction, a lot of the behaviors, the intimacy gets eroded because of sexual behaviors, because of the secrecy, the deception, the betrayal. So for me, the way I see it is more like a pyramid, where our goal is intimacy in a relationship. And under that highest level of that pyramid of intimacy, you have to have vulnerability, because vulnerability is being known, it's knowing, it's seeing, it's being seen. And underneath that level of vulnerability, you have to have some level of safety, some level of trust. I think trust builds safety, and safety builds trust. But underneath that whole, those other levels of the pyramid, you have to have truth and honesty. So what we assume a lot of times in relationship gets eroded when it comes to sex addiction and betrayal trauma, where that level of honesty just gets eroded. So disclosure is a way of putting out the facts on the table and really getting to that foundation of truth and honesty to rebuild a foundation of relationship. Anything more you'd say?
I would just say they have a little bit of different journey. I think I've probably been a CSAT a little longer than you, and I'm not from a major metropolitan area, so I've been here long enough to see some real shifts in the way the disclosure process comes about. And thankfully so. I remember the day when it was actually not only in some ways disempowering for partners, but disempowering for the partner's therapist as well. And not out of ill intention, I think simply out of a lack of understanding and knowledge about how to actually empower partners through the process, not just for the end goal of the disclosure process and making that less traumatic and more creating more opportunities for healing, but empowering them in a way that follows them through the rest of their recovery. I sometimes work with partners. I sometimes actually am the addict's guide and do a lot of couple disclosures. And I found that that process is actually equally important for the recovering addict. I tend to work with addicts who either know they have a tremendous amount of trauma and want to work with a trauma therapist through that process, or both. Addicts who really want to do their recovery and their disclosure in a way that helps their partner heal. And generally speaking, when it can be done in that way, the relationship itself has a better footing to recover and to eventually thrive.
Yeah. And you've seen that happen more recently, the shift these last years, 5, 6, 7, 10 years.
Yeah, it's a thankful shift, and I think that maybe I came in with a different lens because I am a trauma therapist, but there's some small but really important ways that partners can be prepared that really helps with that process. And I'm very thankful to have you so that we, the work that we've done on creating something that works on both ends, a process that works on both ends, has been a real gift.
Sure. So I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh, God. Okay.
If you could say, what is disclosure? How would you define what it is? So anyone that's looking at this, that's trying to say, what the heck is this process?
Well, I think for partners, it's about seeking a sense of safety through the truth, the full truth, the whole truth, the facts. And from that process, first of all, there's hope for the relationship because it's the deception that, in my experience, most often strangles it. But it's also with the truth, with the facts, the partner can begin to understand some of the experiences that have happened for her. Sometimes she doesn't even have words for to describe, until after the disclosure. It's a process of, I think, going into the disclosure thinking that it's all about understanding your significant other's truth, but what I see partners do with that is they toggle right off of that. It's like, okay, now I've got a foothold to figure out what was going on with me. When you were doing that and lying to me about it, what was going on in my life? So it's a way of creating it's a hero's journey for the partner.
And I think you said something really important there, that one thing that we've been talking a lot about when we were coordinating, how do we facilitate these, what's our differences, what are our similarities? One thing that I've seen is there's not one size that fits all. Every couple is going to be in a different situation, where they are in the journey. If someone's got 3 months into this, it's going to look a lot different than a couple that's maybe waited 3, 5, 10 years for a disclosure. So that's something that, you talked about the hero's journey. You talked about how, I just think how important that process is of really getting to the truth through this.
Yeah, for the partner, it's only when the truth is out on the table that she can figure out what her recovery really needs to be. It's like, what am I recovering from? And along the way, there's a period of significant grief. Women are efficient, and I speak, most of the partners I work with are women.
What do you mean by efficient?
Like, I'm not going to grieve all of it until I know all of it.
Oh, that's fair.
How can I grieve all of it until and even if I've grieved a lot of little pieces along the way, well, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Well, how do you know what you're grieving when you don't know?
Yeah.
One thing that we've talked about is where disclosure fits in this process, and what might early on be very much about the disclosure side. It shifts to really empathizing and validating and understanding the experience of the partner. So one thing I'll say, just to wrap up, is how important this process is. I think there's not one size that fits all. I think we need to be really clear about that this is a process we really believe in. And to know, I'll just use one analogy. I see it like a surgery where you're going in, you're cleaning out an infected wound, And, you know, it's a really important process to clean that wound. Yet at the same time, once you're cleaning it, it might bring up pain. It will get worse before it gets better, most likely. And you're going to have a process of actually healing from that surgery. And if there's an infection, it might spread to your body for a short period of time in the process of healing. So I see it that way, and I think that image seems to match for a lot of people's experience.